What is up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the SEC on the College Huddle. I am your host, Michael, from the Fanatics Show, with my co-host, Chris Giannini. How you doing tonight, Chris?
Pretty good, man. Glad to be here.
Good deal. And tonight we're joined by Daniel from the Gator Truth Podcast. Daniel, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Thanks for coming on. We might possibly have an appearance from Landon Tucker of the My Dogs Are Barking pod. He does have a prior engagement, but might be able to hop on. But tonight, we're going to jump right into it. We're going to look, first of all, at Kirby Smart's new contract. We're going to look at it and give our thoughts on it and what some of the effects of that contract could be if we go into revenue sharing as well. So Kirby Smart signed a 10-year one. Let's see. It was a 10-year. I've got it pulled up right here. $112.5 million contract. So it's the biggest one in history now, bigger than Nick Saban's contract. He'll be getting paid at the very least $10 million annually. Chris, what were your thoughts on this contract when you saw it come out?
This is where college football is going. I mean, this is just what they are. Brian Kelly got 10 years, $100 million, $10 million a year. Kirby's, I think, is 10 million, 30 million. 10 years, 30 million. 10 years, 130 million. I'll get all that out. So I think it's 13 a year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Daniel, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, I would love for it to not be as long, maybe give them some chance to head to the NFL, without a large buyout. But I mean, when you come to Georgia and you have a program that hadn't won in 40 years, and then you go back to back and very close to a third one, I mean, you deserve to be the highest paid coach in college football. And we're just going to see where that ends up taking the program over the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, he's taken a program that it was never in the gutter under Mark Richt. No. He just could never get Georgia over the hump. And Kirby Smart has taken it and just run with it. Had a few years where he had to build that program to where he wanted it, and now he's got it right where he wants it, and it's just year after year. They're the new Alabama is kind of where it's at. Nick Saban took that program and just built it up and turned it into a team that nobody wants to face. When you saw Alabama on your schedule, it added a certain fear to the game upcoming. Even though you might not say it, it's there. That's what Georgia is now. And, looking at this contract here, he also has bonuses in it as well. If he makes the SEC championship game, it is worth $100,000 just for playing in it, or $300,000 for winning it. If he participates in a New Year's Six bowl game, it is $175,000. A college football semifinal game, a playoff semifinal game, is $500,000. If he makes the championship game, it is $750,000. And if you win the national championship, it is another $1 million. That's insane numbers right there.
Yeah, I mean, but we're talking about schools getting $80 million, $100 million a year for TV money. So if you have to pay $13 million to $15 million after all the bonuses are done for a national championship, that's kind of a drop in the bucket to a $100 million TV contract.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, it's roughly 15%, right? So that's not a large percentage of it when he and the players are a driving force of that. So
Right. And winning as well increases revenue because when fans are happy, more fans are coming to games, more fans are buying merch. So in a way, you're recouping your investment, not just through the rights deal, which that's an excellent point, but you're also with a more involved fan base. they're excited, and it also helps the players because you probably will have higher NIL input. And I can tell you from Florida, there's been questions now. I don't believe it's right, but we do have some fans who are like, well, we're not really where we are. I don't know if I want to contribute to NIL. Meanwhile, I think the opposite. We're not where we want to be. We need to contribute. So if you're Georgia, you're also helping out your players when you give, in my opinion, giving, a contract like this, because I don't want to say you're trying to buy a national title, but you're trying to lock in a guy who can get you there. And with that comes more investment, both in your program and with your players, from NIL and also just revenue from people coming to games and everything that comes from that.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to look at it too. Some of this $130 million is money from past 3 years, right? They have not that his former contract was anything to sneeze at, but they have made a fortune off of him over the last 3 years, what the school has done and what he has done, because they're not bidding against anybody else. They're not competing with any other college football team in the country. Kirby's not leaving Georgia for any job in college football. So it's not like they're negotiating against anyone else. This is good faith money to show them, you're one of us. We need you to know that you have our full support. And that's what this money does.
Yeah, and Daniel kind of mentioned it earlier. You mentioned it right there as well. He's not leaving Georgia for some other job in college football, but you are trying to keep him from going to the NFL, because that is the only other logical step that he could take. Now, whether he would have success in the NFL, that's a different story. We know, Nick Saban, he didn't have the greatest success in the NFL, but he's the greatest college football coach of all time. And, I do believe that, I mean, both of you hit the nail on the head. This is just an insurance that you love the way that the program is going, and you want to make sure that he stays there to have that success in the future. And we do have somebody commenting in, Matt Stevens with the comment, you pay $15 million for a great coach and stay in the Power 2, or get $0 and left behind like my beloved Cal for not taking football seriously. And he makes a great point. You've got to pay to stay ahead of times, otherwise you're gonna get left behind.
Yeah, that's correct. Yes. Matt is one of my best friends in the entire world. He's also the funniest person I've ever met in my life, by the way. So I appreciate him jumping in. And he is a Cal Bears fan. So if you're a college football fan and you're a Cal Bears fan, you're dedicated. You're dedicated more than any of us down here are. Maybe Vanderbilt fans.
You mean the two fans that show up at the stadium?
Yeah.
And all the Tennessee fans that show up there?
Yeah. Well, funny story while you've made that comment. In 2022, I went up to Nashville, could only stay for a little bit because I was going to a wedding. And I said, what? I really respect Vandy fans showing up, the ones that do showing up every week, knowing they're probably going to lose. I say that, have to leave to go be in a wedding before the game's over, and we lost that game. So I will not knock the two Vandy fans that show up again.
That's right.
And a little side.
You know what's funny? They usually show up for the Ole Miss games, and up until the last 4 years, they kind of were a coin flip, win or lose against Ole Miss every year, and I never could understand that. Even when Ole Miss would have these really good seasons, they just couldn't get over Vandy, and I thought that was weird.
Yeah, I don't really understand that rivalry between Ole Miss and Vanderbilt. I live in the mid-state of Tennessee, so I should be able to find out about it, but I have no idea what the deal with that rivalry is. But Daniel, you mentioned the Florida loss to Vanderbilt in that game. It was funny seeing how the field storming was just everybody single file line going out onto the field. There was nobody jumping over barriers like you see in other stadiums. Yeah.
Funny thing about that as well. In 2016, I was up in Neyland when you guys had beaten us for the first time in 10 years. I was so mad you didn't storm the field. I'm like, we're never going to storm the field at Florida. So man, this was the opportunity. I thought I would see it. And then, of course, Vandy have to leave early to be in a wedding. And so I wasn't there for that. I'm like, oh, gosh. Of course, then FSU the next week storms the field for beating a 6-6 Florida team for some reason. So I'm like, well, I finally got to see it.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But going back to Kirby Smart now, question that I have is something that Chris, you and I have kind of talked about off the air a little bit. If we go to the revenue sharing in college football, like we have seen some talks about, a little bit of headway on, how is that going to affect contracts like this one that Kirby Smart has? Because you know that the contract is going to have to be taken down some. Like you can't just pay out this you can't pay out this $113 million right here and still expect to have enough in the program to share it with all the players as well. So how do you think this affects contracts going forward?
So I don't necessarily know that I agree with that. Okay. It's $100-something million. I don't know why, if he's taking $15 million to win a national championship, where's the other $85 million got to go? Okay. Like I know it goes to fund a lot of other things, but if you took half of that, they were talking about, the number that they were talking about players getting is around like 20 million, which I think that's incredibly low. I think it's going to be more than that. And when I say players, I don't think that's just football. I think that's getting divided amongst like all of the college athletes that's got to go. And now football will get the majority of it, but football is the one that's bringing the money in. Okay.
Yes.
In no other world, in no other sport, would you forget sports, forget that these people are college kids for a minute. All right. In any other, see, we just know college, and we know that football has funded all these other things for so long. In what society could you say that you have a lot of poor to middle class people that are majority Black that are going to do a job, that are going to do a task, they're going to do a thing, and it's going to generate hundreds of millions of dollars, okay? And then we're going to take that hundreds of millions of dollars, and then we're going to go use that money to support a lot of sports like tennis and swimming and gymnastics. And hang on, these are a bunch of upper middle class white kid sports. Like these are all club, like lacrosse, like these are all club sports, right? Why does the school have to pay for that? If these kids didn't go to college, they would still be playing lacrosse because they played it for free. Baseball, for instance. I've got friends that they're in Little League. They're talking middle schoolers, and they spend tens of thousands of dollars every year for their kid to travel baseball in middle school. You think they wouldn't spend another 10 grand when they're in college to do it? Why would we take the money from these kids that they earned because the other sports just don't make the money for it? I think the fact that, well, the coaches got to get paid. No, these are the people that are generating all the money. If you start taking money from them to pay for things that don't generate money, they're going to stop generating the money. That's my opinion. I think that is counter to what most people think, because I do understand that there is a system of college, and the money's got to get shared out a little bit. I just don't like that. I think that you can take your rowing team and shove it up your ass. That's what I think. I think there's no reason the NCAA or college sports need to be involved in that. LSU is really, really good for some weird reason at beach volleyball. Yeah, that's great. If any of the football money is going to fund beach volleyball, I'm not okay with this. Okay, those girls are awesome, and they got mamas and daddies that can help them support that beach volleyball habit.
Daniel, what do you think about it?
Well, I will take it in a similar but kind of different direction. The one thing that I think doesn't get discussed enough when it comes to revenue sharing and stuff like that, whether we like it or not, is Title IX, and that's going to be a fun hurdle, especially as we talk about like equal pay laws and things of that nature, because a lot of these schools, being state schools, kind of have to follow those laws. So it's going to be interesting to see the conversations, because I do agree football should get most of the money, in my opinion. But how do you, under Title IX, I don't have an answer to it. How do you pay, your quarterback, and NIL being a different thing, but let's say revenue sharing? How do you pay, your star quarterback, and yet let's say 10,000 for easy money, and then you're like, oh, here's your $500 check, back up to the lacrosse team, female lacrosse team. It's like, can you really do that, as you're supposed to have equality in there? So that it's going to be an interesting thing to see. Again, I'm not saying that's necessarily my view on how it should go, of you pay those the same, but there is that hurdle that we're going to have to see how that breaks down. But I'm also, while you bring up that, some of these NIL collectives, like I know Florida, 90% of the giving probably in them are to football. But I know Florida, every student athlete gets some sort of NIL through that collective, even though the vast majority goes to football.
That's right.
And part of me is like, I have the same feelings as Chris sometimes, where he's talking about, why are we paying this person? But at the same time, for me, at least when Florida does it, it does make me feel good, at least in an altruistic way of, hey, at least we're taking care of everyone. Yeah, whether that's the best approach or whether that's the winning approach, that's something else that remains to be seen. But, there's something to be said for feeling good sometimes.
So something that I think is going to get argued. So right now, the Title IX argument from a lawyer's perspective is the schools are going to say, yes, for every guy that gets paid, a girl has to get paid, but the pay doesn't need to be equal. Okay, that is not, that you can't require that. All right. Title IX will say no, it's differently. My response for that would be some type of compromise, which was going to say, all right, whatever percentage of revenue that we are paying the football guys, because they're the ones that are going to decide all the other decisions. If the school makes $100 million, okay, and we're giving 20 million of that 100 to from football, and we're giving 20 million of that to football players, whatever the revenue is for their sport, even though it doesn't make money, I'm not asking for how much money it makes, I'm talking about revenue. Whatever it is for their sport, those individual athletes are allowed that percentage in NIL. And that is the biggest legal thing that I think will help both sides come to a compromise, okay? Because those other sports do generate some revenue, all right? They just have so many costs involved that they outrun their revenue greatly. But that helps you still be able to give, a couple of $1,000 to a lacrosse player and still be able to pay your quarterback $8 million, because the quarterback of a football team is the only reason you're making the $100 million a year to begin with.
Yes.
And that's the argument that I think should be able to legally satisfy everyone. Now, most of the administrative lawyers up to this point have been very, very, very bad. Their only wins are against the NCAA, who are completely inept. So when you're beating up a moron, it makes you look smart. They need to make smarter, better arguments. I think that's a winning argument. I'm not an attorney, but I think that's a winning argument.
Yeah, well, I believe you're talking to an attorney right now. Isn't that right, Daniel? So
that is correct.
Holy crap. Well, then I'm going to stop pretending to be an attorney.
Well,
but all right, so let me ask you this. What do you think of my argument, my justification?
Oh, no, I think it's a great argument if you're talking about like fair, percentage of revenue for your school. Now, the question is, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, as I have done a little bit. Question is, when you're getting these rights fees, for example, ABC, contract with the SEC, they're paying, again, just using a round number, 100 million for the rights to Florida sports, or 100 million to the right. They're not saying we're paying 100 million for the rights to LSU football. You know what I'm saying? Even though we know most of the rights come from that, I guess it comes down to, I don't know the answer to this.
All right, so
what
here's
does
how you
the
answer.
contract
So
say?
here's how I would answer that: is yes, ABC's paying us this much money, right? Well, how much is this sport on ABC? How much is this sport on ABC? And that's how you divide up the money, right? If they end up putting a couple of lacrosse games on there, then they get a percentage of that money. But if the contract is nothing but college football and basketball, then the millions of dollars get split between those two sports. And from an accounting standpoint, we're just talking about revenue now. Because then you could look at the SEC network. All right. The SEC network has all of these smaller sports on there all the time. I mean, it's got women's softball on there a ton. So you take the money from the SEC network and you would divide it up for how many shows are specifically about football. How many minutes, how many hours are we talking about this sport or dedicating to one sport or another? And that's how I would think from a legal standpoint, that would be the best way for somebody to take an accounting of, is give me how many minutes or hours of airtime, each sport has been broken down on the SEC network or on ABC or on ESPN. Yeah. The places that we actually have a contract with.
Right.
And then we divide the payments up by that.
And that's good. The thing, ESPN, SEC network, ABC are all the same contract.
It's all the same entity, right. but we had the SEC network far before we had the ABC
yes.
contract. So those two things are, ESPN is still its own book of business that still has its own budgetary thing. And then the SEC network, while it's owned by ESPN, I'm almost certain has its own contract as well.
Right. And that's what will be interesting to see as we start to see these grants of rights and things change. But what I would be curious, and again, this is me being devil's advocate, certain sports, men's basketball, for example, or women's basketball has a lot more games, than football. So in theory, you could end up in situations where there is more airtime for a sport. Doesn't mean there's more eyeballs necessarly on that sport.
Oh,
but yeah,
break it down by ratings. Oh, I'll kind of nerd out about this stuff, right? Like the smaller we get to doing these things, the actual closer number that you're going to get to what is right. Like I'm not trying to find what helps the thing that I like as opposed to the thing that I don't like. I'm actually trying to find a real way to get down to a number, and I'm not afraid of going deep into the math. I'm really not.
Right. And trust me, there's a lot that we agree on, but I like giving you the counterpoint because I guarantee you we're having listeners that are like, I disagree or whatnot. So why not ask
you're not kidding. When we talk about right now, if you look at minutes aired, women's softball is dominating. And then also you got to look at, the women's basketball and what it's done to ratings as opposed to what men's basketball has done to ratings. They're kind of blowing the men's sports out of water.
Yeah, I think those are some fantastic points that both of you have made. And I guess going back to what I originally said about how would it affect a contract this big? And you mentioned it, you've got, we'll use $100 million as the number because that's a good that's a good number.
I also think the money's going to be close to that.
Yeah, you're probably right. So you're looking at, we'll go with $12 million annually going to Kirby Smart. That's not including, any bonuses that he gets. You've got however much set aside for football. You've got your assistants that you've also got to pay. You've got these numbers right here. And then you've got what is being shared with other programs. So I guess that's where I get into, by the time it's all divvied up, are they going to have to cut down on part of the number in the contract? And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the numbers as well as y'all probably do. I know, Chris, you love digging into this sort of stuff. And then Daniel, you being a lawyer, you know, kind of looking at some of these numbers, you probably know it a little bit better than I do. I sit here from the outside and think, you know, you see this huge number of pay going to a head coach. And then you talk about this revenue sharing, trying to share it with athletes all the way across the board with every sport, plus all these other coaches in there as well. How do you not have to lessen that number on a coaching contract to be able to make it all work?
I just wonder, are they just going to assume that if the money gets taken out from revenue sharing and for some weird reason they just don't have it, I've got to assume that they'll just fall on boosters to come up with the money. I mean, before we ever got these massive revenue sharing deals, and they were basically only, you know, boosters paying the bills, coaches were still making really good money. You know,
Chris, I think we lost you for a minute.
Oh, wow. I don't know if I'm being recorded or not. But anyway.
Yeah, there you go. You're back now.
Texas A&M just fired a coach for $85 million, okay?
Yeah.
Like, I think we're a long way from not being able to come up with $13 million a year to pay a coach, even if you have to share the revenue with the players. Now, maybe I'm naive for that. Maybe the players' revenue is a lot more than I'm expecting it to be. But like I said, when a school just divvied up almost this contract to fire a coach, and then they've got to for the two coaches that they're paying right now is probably more than this contract total. I'm just not really worried about these college schools running out of money.
Yeah, what do you think, Daniel?
I mean, honestly, it'll be interesting. I mean, great points, Chris, about A&M paying more than this contract to get out. Get out of the Jimbo Fisher issue. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Definitely it's a numbers game. And I do think with revenue sharing, it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. And also as the rights fees go up, and like Chris said, you've got women's basketball putting up record numbers for that sport. So how much does that potentially increase rights fees, and then more money in that pot for everyone? So I can't wait to see where it goes. But again, until we know exactly what the parameters are, you know, it's hard for me to say, because it might be a percentage like we talked about, 100 million, 20%, 20 million, let's divvy it up. Or it may be, you know, hey, we feel like everyone's just going to get this set amount per player, and it may be up to per school, which would also be interesting because, like I said, some, you know, just like I'm talking about in the NIL space, and some collectives are like, hey, no, we're going to put, you know, 99% of money towards football that's donated to us. And then you got Florida that does put more money into football than anything else, but almost everyone, if not every athlete, gets something. You know, just the different theory. I use that as an example to say, if it gets left up to the schools, if the rules just simply share revenue, it'll be curious to see, you know, is it going to be up to the schools? Is it going to be a general mandate? And or is SEC going to step in and be like, okay, does this? And it's by conference. And then, of course, you know, we're talking about coaching contracts and how that can impact. But based on that, does that impact player acquisition? Like, hey, I know I get 40 just using a number, I get 40% of revenue if I go to the Big Ten, 20% at SEC. What's my chance to make more money? And then as a coach, with that, you know, volatility in the market and recruiting, would that then impact my wants of a contract, or how much I would take in a contract if that means a little bit more for the players so I can be more competitive in recruiting? So it's really an exciting time to see, because there are so many questions and so many what ifs. And I'm sure we had all night. Chris and I could probably come up with 50 different scenarios breaking down numbers of how this can go really good or really bad or anywhere in between.
And I would sit here and watch every single second of it. So.
I think this is going to be an interesting thing to follow through. But we've got to remember, like, we just went through a year where NIL was completely legal, and a lot of kids got paid, right? Like yes, LSU puts the majority of all their money into football, but they've also made it abundantly clear in Baton Rouge. I can only speak for my school because that's what I know. That if you're a winner, if you're competing, you're going to get paid. Our women's basketball team got paid a lot. Our men's baseball team gets paid. They're not earning their money, but they got paid. Okay. We got the dudes. Our gymnastics team that just won a national championship, those girls got paid. And we're not talking about a little bit of money. And we're not just talking about Livy Dunn, who makes like $4 million a year off of Instagram. We're talking about girls that nobody's ever heard of until they started watching, for some reason, women's gymnastics. And these girls are making real money from NIL opportunities. And there is no revenue sharing. There is no mandate from the government. There is no mandate from the school. This is just sponsors, people who are fans, boosters, call them what you want, that are saying, we love you guys and we want to support. You don't have to make them do it. I had a conversation with an Ole Miss friend of mine at dinner a couple of nights ago, a couple of weeks ago. And his response was, once we start revenue sharing, and if he was working under the assumption that all the money is going to go to football, because he didn't think NIL would have anything. NIL has more to do with scholarship. And his thought was, well, we'll just take them all off scholarship. We'll just pay them all. And now they're employees. And now we don't have to have any women's sports. And what would be our motivation for keeping them around? And I said the same reason Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. Like, he doesn't make a nickel off of it, and it probably cost him a couple $100 million a year. Okay. It's a trophy buy. It's what you do. I was like, women's basketball doesn't make us anything until they become a monster. And now they started making money. Go ask South Carolina what they think they're making off of Dawn Staley and those girls. I bet they're pretty proud with what they're making off of them. And I bet those girls are getting paid. So our gymnastics team, we went out and we paid the best gymnastics coach we could hire. What's he make? Like $80,000 a year? Come on, dude. He's a gymnastics coach. He's not making Brian Kelly money. He didn't cost anything to the real budget, but we went and got the best. And then he went and got some girls, and we paid those girls, and they did awesome. And that's awesome. Like, this is how this is going to work. It's not a coincidence that all the SEC schools magically went from not caring about women's sports at all to being elite level competitive in women's basketball, women's gymnastics, and women's softball. Those sports don't make us any money, but how did we get competitive? How did we get good? We're making a shit ton of money, and we're spending it on things that we think are cool, fun, and it is I'm trying to use the phrase, there's an economic term. It's the best bang for your buck, right? If we throw another $50,000 at football, it's a drop in the bucket. But man, we put $50,000 in women's basketball, we could win a championship. It's that mentality and philosophy. So I think it's cool. I think it's fine. And right now, nobody's being mandated to pay anything.
See, and just the opposite of your revenue sharing.
Yeah.
Where, hey, let's drop.
Well, but I'm also a free market capitalist who believes that if you're good, you get paid. And if you're not, you don't. And that's just the way the world works. There's been jobs that I sucked at, and I made way more money than I was owed. And there's jobs I've been really good at, and they either paid me what I was worth or I left. Like, this is just how I think the world works. And I know that everybody doesn't agree with that. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the system we have now. I kind of don't want these guys to become employees. I think that's going to be bad for them. That's my personal opinion. But I also think it's going to happen.
Yeah. We had a conversation about it. I believe it was last week about what would happen if the players became employees, and I don't think that it's a good thing for the sport either, but it
I also
also
don't think it's good for the players.
no, exactly. But
I think they got a pretty sweet deal right now. They're a free agent every year.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's 100% correct. I do think that it's heading towards that direction, but maybe somewhere in all this, there could be a solution where they're not employees, but everybody can get paid. So we'll see about that. But do you guys have anything else on the revenue sharing, Kirby Smart, and all that before we move on?
No, Kirby got a bag, man. And as much as I don't like the guy, I think he's earned it.
Yeah, 100%. So with that, we're going to move on to our second segment here. We'll see how long this goes to see if we have a third segment. But this past week, ESPN, ABC, and the SEC, they dropped some times for week 1 of college football. We do have a couple of Thursday night games that are going to be played week 1. We've got Arkansas and Arkansas Pine Bluff, 7:30 Eastern on ESPNU, and Murray State playing against Missouri at 8 Eastern on SEC Network. So what are your guys' thoughts on Thursday night games in the SEC for week 1? Daniel, I'll start with you on this.
In a way, I like it because it allows me to see, various teams. I know for a few years there, Tennessee was starting on Thursday night, so it was fun to see. I'm sure you had lots of fun watching Florida fall flat on Thursday night last year to begin the season, or at least I heard some fans from other schools did. But anyways, I enjoy it. I'm not the biggest fan of weeknight games, to be honest. But with that said, as a viewer, and as long as it's not my team, hey, it's something to check out. And hopefully there are an SEC more marquee matchup like Florida, Utah last year. And I think someone had a big game 2-3 years ago, and it's escaping the top of my head in the SEC. A good way to kick things off. I don't mind that, but when we're talking about the schedule that we do have, right now, where it's, as I've done lost, Pine Bluff at Arkansas, but at least it's college football. It's something to at least get back in the mood of the game before, we see our teams play on Saturday. So there is that positive. It's the SEC. It's back. I say it's the best time of the year is college football season. And so, it's that good thing. I just wish we had a marquee matchup Thursday night. That's not my team because attending weeknight games is a problem, but for me.
Yeah, Chris, what do you think about Thursday night games?
Well, so I don't attend any games hardly ever. I'm an old man. I watch football at my house, and I have an unbelievable setup. And I've taken all the money that I used to spend going to games and put it into a great TV room. With that being said, I want, by this time, I wish we had a lot more games on week 0. Like, we are at a point where when we get to week 0 and then week 1, like, I'm so starved for football. I think it's good that they kind of give us a little trash games, because if you gave me the dessert right at the beginning, like if we had Florida Miami as the first game of the season for week 1, and I've waited all this year for football, I don't know that that wouldn't be healthy, right? Like I need to dip a toe in because I've been waiting I've starved myself of football for so long that I just got to have something. So watching Arkansas play Arkansas Pine Bluff is probably the right kind of appetizer that I need. But yeah, I'm great with it being on Thursday. The NFL hasn't started yet, and it is one more night that I get to sit in front of my TVs and watch football. I love the sport. It is I used to say that it was like a really unhealthy relationship. I don't think so. I think it might be the most healthy relationship I've ever had. It gives me so much of what I want, and I give it everything else. And I give my part, and it gives me its part. And does it cause me to neglect my family that I love? Yeah, sure. Does it make me a little bit? But listen, that's what unconditional love is. And this is who I was when they came into the family, and I'm not changing. And it's okay. And, all the rest of the year, I'm great dad, great husband. Football season comes, we're going to take a time out. And when it's not game time, I'm all in. But when the game starts, I got to go. No, I'm very grateful for the Thursday night games when we can get them.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as both of you. Any football is better than no football. And even if it's an Arkansas versus Arkansas Pine Bluff or a Murray State versus Missouri, that's better than not having anything on the TV to watch. So give me football each night of the week because that gives me something to watch. And going from a coaching standpoint, that also can help out as far as recruiting goes. Because if you play those weeknight games, you can make it out to a Friday night high school game to do some recruiting, where when you play on Saturdays, you probably can't do that unless it's a local high school and you've got just a little bit of time. But even that time needs to be spent preparing for that upcoming game that you have on Saturday. So I think from a coaching standpoint, a recruiting standpoint, the Thursday night games, they're fantastic, especially, last year. Well, last year's game, Tennessee, was on a Saturday, but you also played a neutral site game. And I think this is part of the thing that I like about neutral site games is you can go and you can recruit in that area where the neutral site game is. Now, as far as the rest of it, do away with neutral site. Give me home and away. But it does help from a recruiting standpoint. For instance, in Tennessee, Tennessee is owned by the entire, or Tennessee owns the entire state as far as the Tennessee Vols, except, Memphis has got some, they've got some leeway out in West Tennessee, but the mid-state.
But they're not taking 4 and 5 star elite talent.
Right.
These kids are talented. They're a bunch of 3-star kids that they're upper level G5 kids.
Yeah. But as far as the mid-state goes, Tennessee owns that as well. It's not Vanderbilt. And when Tennessee can go and play a neutral site game in Nashville, that only helps with the recruiting out there. So, but going back to the original point, love Thursday night games because, as I mentioned, having football is better than no football.
Yes.
God, I'm so starved for it, especially at the beginning of the year. Hey, you brought up something that I didn't think about. You talked about being on Thursdays, then being able to recruit on going to Fridays. I think it also helps recruiting. I didn't think of this until you said it. Having the TV all to yourself. There was a couple of years ago where like Maction was like on Wednesday night, almost every night of the week on Wednesdays. Then after like the first 3 weeks of the season, and I'm going to tell you that if you look at those schools, I bet they got a pretty big bump in recruiting, before in the G5 world, due to the fact that they're on TV all the time. I think being on television and being on television by yourself, being on TV on Saturday nights is awesome. It is unbelievable, and there's no experience like it. But when 4 other major college football games are on at the same time, it's not the same as I own the television. I own the game. LSU's got the Monday night game. I'm super excited for that. We had it last year. The whole world's going to be watching. If you have the Friday night game, the same thing. Like this is something that I really appreciate and like about college football, and I didn't realize it until you said it. I do think that helps recruiting when you get to be on TV by yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the Friday night game. We have a Friday night game in the SEC in week 1. It is Oklahoma hosting Temple at 7:00 Eastern on ESPN. And, it's kind of weird now saying Oklahoma in the SEC, but it's the day and time that we're in now. Changes are everywhere. conference realignment is happening all the time, and Oklahoma is in the SEC now.
Oh, yeah. It's going to take some getting used to, especially since I know as a Florida fan, we don't play them for the next 2 years. So it's going to be something we're going to almost experience at arm's length. So I'll be interested to see how they adapt to the SEC. I know year one, they were so. Year two, they had a great year, but now they step into the SEC. How is Venables going to do coming in here and having to do it week in, week out, and coming into environments that you just don't see week in and week out in the Big 12? So it'll be very interesting. And, the point that was made about Thursday and having your own television slot, this is truly the example on Friday, because whether you consider TCU Stanford to be an eyeball game, Temple, Oklahoma is the lead into that game. So you really don't have anything competing for eyeballs on Friday night. And then you might even get people from those schools tuning in and be like, you know what? I want a warm-up game to watch before my game starts, and you get those eyeballs. So it'll be fun to see that Friday with Oklahoma and Temple. I do think they take care of Temple, but it'll be very interesting to see it, the intro come in and see the SEC logo there in Norman on the field, and new age. And it may not be the last time we see an expansion.
Yeah, I hope it's the last time for a little bit, but
it won't be.
Or for a while. But anyway, I'm with you. I'm excited. Oklahoma being in the SEC and getting a game all to themselves to kind of air. This is what football is going to look like on the ABC, and I think it's going to be fun.
Yeah. So real quick, other than your answer being any football is better than no football, how do you feel about Friday night games? Because me personally, now I love having Friday night games because, as I just mentioned, any football is better than no football. But Friday nights to me are for high school football. Until this coming year, for the past 6-7 years, I've been the PA announcer at my local high school. So Friday nights, that's high school football. But, I understand there's some people, they don't like high school football as much. They like their college. So Friday night games are fantastic. But what do you guys feel about Friday night games?
Well, I'm okay with it. And I'm okay. Sorry, Daniel, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're good.
Jump in there. I'm good with it, mainly for the fact that this is a TV thing. Okay. I do think that the local high schools are the only people that are affected from the team hosting the game. So this game is being played in Oklahoma. Your local high schools would have a lot more fans and a lot more people going to them that will be probably going to this game. So that's a tough thing. It's 1 week. And if I was Oklahoma, I would work with those schools. I do think it's important that the universities work closely with the schools around them. And if you pull fans from those areas, you knew 2 years ago this was going to be the game, right? You should have reached out and said, hey, when you're opening your schedule, just have an away game. Just make sure you're not at home this Friday, because we're going to be hosting a Friday night game. I think it's not a hard thing for places to work with one another. And I also don't think that it's a big deal if it's one game. It's one game a year, and it won't be the whole country doing it. If it's one team, so basically 2 teams in the whole country are going to play. One place is going to host one game every week on a Friday. If it was to be every week, it doesn't concern me. There are millions of people sitting at home not going to college, high school football. There's millions of areas around the country that don't have good high school football. And even those that do, they're just not into it for whatever reason. They can sit at home. They can watch a college football game. I'm happy with it. I get to watch football because I'm not going out to my local high schools either. So.
And, I agree with pretty much everything that Chris said. One thing I will miss is Pac-12 used to have 10 o'clock games on Friday. And those were some fun games to watch.
Oh,
I'm going to miss.
I do hate everything about the
third
Pac-12 being gone sucks.
Yeah.
And not to cut you guys off, but I do think, isn't the Big 12 doing like a Friday night thing this year where they're having games?
I hope so.
I think I
10 o'clock
remember
slot
hearing
was
that.
awesome. That Pac-12 After Dark on Friday nights was incredible.
Yeah, I think I remember hearing that back a month or two ago that the Big 12 is going to have at least one game on Friday nights each week this year. But I don't hold me to that. But I'm pretty sure that I heard that a couple months ago.
So we're not a Big 12 program, so we're okay to not know that information.
Yeah.
Sorry, Daniel, we cut you off. Sorry, bro.
Oh, you're good. Maybe that's why Oklahoma's playing on Friday, and that's all.
Oh, I love it.
They're just still straddling the fence there. They can't get out of their old ways.
Yeah, they're trying to figure out if they really want to come over to the SEC or not. But
that's
you know what? I actually think Oklahoma fits in real well with us. I genuinely have an appreciation for the fact, as much as I hate that the SEC has gotten so big, I hate these monster conferences. I wish we had 12 conferences instead of the conferences we have. 12 more. I mean, it just smaller is better. It just is. I'm very grateful for the fact that Texas and Oklahoma fit in with us. And the Big 12 trying to pretend that they've been trying to pretend for the last several years that New Jersey is a part of the Big 10, that Rutgers has anything to do with, I mean, okay, they're probably used to playing under gray skies on Saturdays. That's where the combination, the comparison ends right there. Like my boy Matt, his Cal Bears are now in the athletic conference. Like, are we really going to go with this? Like, are we just okay with just not laughing at them? I think we should mock these people. So I'm very grateful that if we are going to become a monster, let's just stay regional. Let's keep it teams that make sense. All right, that's all. Yeah. Oklahoma's about as southern as you're gonna get. They fit in with us.
Well, and that leads to a question. Maybe this is a segment for an entirely different episode, but is the SEC no longer Southeastern Conference, and is SEC its own brand? What I mean by that is, like, you have, for example, another 3-letter, entity, WWE. That's their branding now. It's not World Wrestling Entertainment. It's just WWE. Like, that's just the thing. Is the SEC now, not just with expansion, but just the way everyone references it, is SEC now the thing? And are we losing, almost that identity as the Southeastern Conference, since we've added Texas, Oklahoma, Missouri, over the last few years?
I only think we're still Southern Athletic Conference, or whatever, a Southeastern Conference, because the teams that we've gotten are, Mason-Dixon line adjacent area teams. And they, kind of culturally fit. I think the ACC is very much wanting to just be the ACC and nobody to ask what that stands for. The Big 12 has always been weird because it's just, the Big 10 has always been weird, and the Big 12, I guess. Like, yes, these conferences that have a number next to them, that, like, they're married to this number. What does that mean? It used to mean you were the Big 10 universities in that area. Okay, great. Well, then you went to 12, and then you went to 14, and then you went to 16. But we're cool with you just still being 10. All right, cool. That's fine. Like, words don't have to mean anything anymore. The number 10 just doesn't mean anything anymore.
Very true.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I'm simply just going to say, I think, yes, you can still technically say Southeastern Conference, but I agree with Chris. It's more of like a Southern Conference. But I do think, to really go in depth with it, that is definitely a conversation for another episode, because we could go real deep into that topic right there. But
there, I just gave you some content right there.
Let me just write that down real quick. So.
SEC versus Southeastern Conference.
I don't know. I feel, but like I said, I'm a kind of. I'm very grateful. I hate all this expansion. I hate all the bigger has to be better, and I hate we have convinced fans to root for money instead of championships. I hate all of that. I've become a crotchety old man with it, and I'll say it any time I can, and it'll get nauseating to listen to. I'm just grateful that we are trying to keep it as regional as possible. That's all.
And Michael, add this to your list because I think going along with the same episode, and maybe you've done this already, but I'd love to talk to you about it. If we did expand, sorry, Chris, who is on that list for you? Which, again, another time topic, but since we've got
Chris, don't answer this tonight. Yeah, don't answer this one tonight.
It gets bigger. LSU will join the athletic, the ACC. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I'm good with that too.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. But moving into Saturday games, we do have a few of them that do not have any times on them yet. I'll just run through those real quick. Virginia Tech and Vanderbilt. I do believe that game will be somewhere on TV because that's two Power 5 opponents. You've got a bunch of SEC teams playing Group of 5 teams or even FCS teams. So I do believe this one will be on TV somewhere, probably the SEC network or the ACC network.
Well, if it's on the ACC network, good luck anybody finding it.
Very true. But we do not have a time on that yet. Same thing for Ole Miss and Furman, South Carolina and Old Dominion, Tennessee and UT Chat, Auburn and Alabama A&M, Kentucky and Southern Miss, and then Mississippi State and Eastern Kentucky. But each of these games, except maybe Vanderbilt, should be wins for the SEC in those games. But, poor Vanderbilt.
Old Dominion took down Tech a few times, so you never know.
That is true. Old Dominion is a
Vanderbilt's got a chance.
Do we think Vanderbilt's got a chance? I think that they have a chance. But I don't know.
I don't know that they're as good as Old Dominion, but maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, we'll see on that. But getting down to the games that have been announced. At 12 o'clock Eastern time on ABC, you have Georgia and Clemson in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. You've got Miami and Florida at 3:30 Eastern on ABC. That is in Gainesville. You've got Texas and Colorado State at 3:30 Eastern on ESPN. I believe that is in Austin. You've got Alabama and Western Kentucky at 7 Eastern on ESPN. And you've got Notre Dame against Texas A&M in College Station at 7:30 Eastern on ABC. College Game Day will be there for that game. So the question I have for you guys, do you think they got the schedule right as far as times and all that, or would you have swapped some games and some times? Daniel, I'll start with you.
Oh, man. I was really surprised to see that Georgia and Clemson kick off this season at noon. That's the one I thought would have been in that SEC game of the week primetime spot, just because it's two teams that have been in the national title hunt for the better part of the last, 5-10 years, depending on which team you're talking about. And Notre Dame, A&M, I'm not sold yet on A&M being a top 25 team. I guess a top 25 matchup. I guess it's the allure of Notre Dame that brings that to that spot, and also game day there. I also found it interesting that Florida got sandwiched in between. I figured they would probably be closer. If I knew it was one of these 3 time slots, I would have probably gone with us at the noon. But as a Florida fan, I'm pretty happy. I did put out on my personal Twitter this week, I put out, hey, some of the loudest games, the greatest games, greatest moments, that was 3:30 kicks in the Swamp. Yes, it'll be hot. Yes, it'll be muggy. However, that's where we make our bones. How I really put it, and Chris, don't mean to offend you with this one, but I did say in that tweet, I go, we're not like Stadium and Red Stick that only gets hot for night games. It's the day games that we really make our bread on. And so as a Florida fan, I mean, I get people wanting a night game because it'll be cooler, but I'm like, this is what we're made for. Let's go out and get it. And so it's going to be a lot of fun, and I get to watch a hopefully good football game before my game starts and listen or watch one on the way home. We'll see whether I'm the one driving or not.
Well, I don't take any offense to that. I actually believe that LSU might have every home game at night this year. I think that's a chance it's going to happen. I think they got the schedule right for time-wise. Mainly because I think the most competitive game of those is going to be the Miami-Florida game. And they put that in the ABC now, but traditional CBS 2:30, 3:30 time slot. And that is when SEC fans are wired for show up. This is when our game of the week is on. I do think that is the game of the week of them all. I think them putting the primetime game and game day going to A&M is 100% a money grab, because anytime you get to play host to Notre Dame, you're talking about, I don't know, 5-7 million extra eyeballs that nobody else was accounting for. And so yeah, that's a no-brainer. It doesn't matter. Vanderbilt could have been hosting Notre Dame. Vanderbilt's getting game day, baby. It's just going to happen. These guys, I don't know. See, I'm new to this channel. I don't know how appropriate or inappropriate, crass I could be. I believe that ESPN are ladies of the night when it comes to selling their soul for ratings. Okay? So if they can take Notre Dame, they're going to take Notre Dame. I think they got that right. And I think Georgia and Clemson genuinely believe, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm grossly underestimating what Clemson is going to be this year. But I think by halftime, that game's going to be a snoozer, and everybody's going to be flipping the channel to something else. So that's perfect for noon.
Yeah, I think I think you hit the nail on the head with the Georgia Clemson game. They got that right, putting it at noon. Now, if this had been 5 years ago, no doubt this is the 7:30 kickoff. It is two teams that are at the top of college football world, but this isn't 5 years ago. This is a Clemson
number 1 and number 2. If Notre Dame is playing the top 25 SEC team, they're picking Notre Dame. They could both be 24 and 25. I just believe that. Maybe I'm wrong,
and that's fair.
These guys whore themselves out for ratings on far worse things. So
yeah, that's fair. That's fair, and I think that you're right on that as well. But I believe this is the right spot for Georgia and Clemson, because I do think that, you've got a Clemson team that is going one direction and a Georgia team that is going the opposite direction. And I think that by halftime of this game, it will be a snooze fest. So
Clemson brought in a whole class of transfers. You didn't hear about that? An entire class of transfers.
What was that, before or after? Was it Tyler from Spartanburg called in?
No, it's just Dabo saying that he believes that all high school players are transfer athletes because they're transferring from high school to college. Has there ever been a bigger goober in all of college sports? Ever? Like, if you just took the biggest goober on the planet and gave him an obscene amount of money, this is what you get.
Anyway. You might have a point on that, but
I'm not a Dabo fan.
Can't tell.
Yeah, I do think that he is a good coach. He's just not using his resources and not changing the way that the game, that he's not changing with the game. He got his program to the top of the mountain, but he couldn't keep him there because he refused to change with it.
I don't know. I think he had 2 superstars for quarterbacks back-to-back years. Back-to-back, he had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, 2 of the best we've ever seen in the world.
And that's fair as well.
And since those 2 guys, if you don't have the best quarterback on the planet, quarterback in your team, how have you been?
Yeah, that's fair as well. And I do agree with what you said about the Florida and Miami game. I think this is the best game of the day.
I think it's the best game of the weekend.
Well,
I forgot about it when we were talking about it before show, but looking at this schedule and running through it, I think it is going to be the most entertaining game of the weekend. I think it'll be competitive all the way through.
You might be right. I'm going to save that spot for one other game that we hadn't gotten to yet.
Well, I appreciate that, but
yeah, but I do agree that I love how they put this at 3:30 because it is the traditional SEC primetime spot when it was on CBS. But we're having to change with the game as well. The SEC primetime spot is going to be 7:30 now on ESPN. And that is where they ended up putting the Notre Dame Texas A&M game. I've got a feeling that game could be good because Notre Dame, like them or not, I'm not a huge fan of Notre Dame, but they got a team that they love to run the ball. They love to throw the ball to the tight end. They don't throw the ball to the wide receivers. I don't even know if they have wide receivers on the team. So I think that it's a game that Texas A&M can stay in while they're trying to figure things out under first-year head coach Mike Elko. I'm interested to see what Elko does this year at the helm of Texas A&M. But I think that this game could be a close game, but a real snoozer of a game, which is why I think that if I was to change anything, I would put the Florida-Miami game in the primetime spot at 7:30. But I also do agree with you, Chris, that we're used to that primetime SEC game being at 3:30, so I do like the spot there. But if I was to change anything, it would be that Notre Dame A&M game and the Miami and Florida game.
Yeah, I'm such a creature of habit. I'm never going to get out of that 2:30 slot. I mean, that's just if I have to miss games for anything, I am waking up and I'm getting all of my chores done. Trying to before noon, but really before 2:30. Like that's just mandatory that I got to get everything. And if I don't get it done by then, I just stop. I just quit. I just don't do it anymore. So that's my thought. I'm never going to get out of that habit. I hope that we always have a really good game, which with the amount of teams in the SEC, there is no reason that we shouldn't be having a great game at 2:30 and 7:30 every week.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with that.
So, hey, how do we think? So those three games right there. How do we think the SEC comes out?
Daniel, I'll let you go first.
If I had to bet, and of course, I'm not going to bet against Florida here. I do think also that game being a home game, the Swamp makes a big difference. I think SEC comes out of those three games 2-1. With everything A&M has lost, both from graduation, transfers, things like that, I'm not sure if in game one they overcome Notre Dame, which has seemed to be just fine after Brian Kelly moved on, but we will see. Having been to College Station, it's definitely a great place for college football. So the 12th man could make a difference, but as of right now, I'm going to go with Georgia pretty much as the home team, Florida as the home team. I know A&M's the home team, but I'm going to go with Notre Dame in that one, at least as it stands, as of today, May 16th. So we will see.
Yeah, we're a long way away. I was just curious what your thoughts were. What do you think, Mike?
I'm also going to go 2-1. I think that Georgia easily gets it done. I am not buying into Miami until they can prove it. So I have got Florida winning in that game. And I do think that sitting here today, Notre Dame is just a little bit ahead of A&M, but anything can happen in that game. Like I said, I'm really interested to see what Mike Elko does at the helm of Texas A&M, but I think there's going to be a filling out process, and this game, unfortunately, is going to be the first step in that process. So I think that Notre Dame pulls out a close game to have the SEC go 2-1 in those three games.
Well, I think the direction of both those teams is a bigger gap than maybe we're giving them credit for. I think Notre Dame is poised and set up to be a really good football team this year. Maybe I'm buying into some of the hype. I like Mike Elko. I think he's a really good coach.
I agree with you.
I do think that coaching at Duke and coaching and College Station are two very different jobs, even though it seems like they're the same job. I don't think they are. So I am curious to see that, but I do think as of right now, Notre Dame is significantly more ahead. Will home field advantage, will the craziness of College Station come into play to affect that? Maybe. I'm not really sure, and I'm curious to see. You want to talk about a coach that I believe is just dead set on giving games away. I will show you a picture of Mario Cristobal. That guy has, I don't know why he is seen as this elite, just home run hire of a coach. When he was at Oregon, everyone's, oh my gosh, this is the piece that they've been missing. And then he got to Miami, and I hear people just fall all over this dude. And I'm not saying he's a bag of potatoes, but Jesus, he's got to give me way more than what he has for me to give him any credit whatsoever. And I've seen him lose games because of coaching, not talent, more than I've seen him win games.
That's exactly what I was going to say. The Georgia Tech game from last year.
Take a knee, you win the game. Not smart enough to figure it out. All these guys think, but so many people give football coaches so much credit, and they all say, "Oh, if he wasn't a coach, he would be a genius. He would be a major leader of a Fortune 500." Listen, most of these guys, 80, 90%, maybe more of these guys, are knuckle-dragging Neanderthals that would be PE teachers at best. It is not a knock on PE teachers, I assure you. I'm just telling you, they're not geniuses, okay? These guys aren't solving complex problems. They're really good at running programs and getting in people's ass about mistakes. That's kind of what they know football. Well, I know football and I'm a moron. So that doesn't make you a genius. Anyway, I'll get on my soapbox. I think 2-1 as well. And I'm really, really, really pulling for a sweep. I'd like to see Elko do well at A&M.
Yep, I agree, because I agree with you. I like Elko as a coach, but I do think that it's going to be a filling out process, because you mentioned it. It is a totally different job at Duke than it is at College Station. So I see some early season struggles coming this year, but I think as long as the people in College Station give him time, he will have success at Texas A&M.
I'll use this analogy for you, okay? And maybe this is wrong. Maybe this is an insult to Duke, and if so, I'm sorry. You're rich and you're smart. You're going to be fine. I am the CEO and president of a local flooring store that I own in Olive Branch, Mississippi. Okay, that does not make me qualified to be the CEO of Home Depot. All right, but those two jobs are very, very, very different. I think that's the separation of what Mike Elko is going from. Yeah, he's going to sell flooring, but it's just a different job.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Then the final SEC game of the weekend will be on Sunday, September the 1st. We have Southern Cal and LSU, 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. This game is being played in Las Vegas. So, Chris, how do you feel about this game?
I think this game is going to be a lot of fun to watch, because I don't know that we have solved all of our defensive problems. I will assure you, we will not be 100th in the country on defense. I would bet a significant amount of my capital that we would not be 100 in defense ever again. Or maybe not ever again, but this season, we'll say that. I don't know that would say the same thing for USC. I think we're going to put up points. I think it's going to be a lot of scoring. I don't know that means either of these teams are actually good.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Daniel, what do you think about this game?
As someone who grew up in the Steve Spurrier era of Florida football, I am looking forward to this game. Not much defense, probably lots of points. And that's not to say Spurrier didn't play defense. It's more just about, hey, I love points. I love lots of scoring. And that's what I think we're going to see against two teams that were bad on defense last year. I would say to Chris, and I really hope you're right that your defense improves, but I've heard us Florida fans saying that to ourselves for 4 years now, and we're saying it again this year. But hopefully, I mean, I hope your defense is just as bad because we play you. But with that said, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be even more interesting if somehow this ends up being like a 17-14 game, because does that mean the defense has improved, or are we all going to be questioning the offenses? I don't think that's going to happen, but I saw that happen. I think it was 04 Miami FSU, where it ended up being a low scoring game and they thought it would be high. And I was with a Miami fan and a FSU fan that night, and they're like, oh, that just means both teams are good. And then both teams were not good. So
yeah.
So strange things happen in college football sometimes. That's just the one that came off the top of my head. So yeah, but I am really looking forward to it. I think it's a great marquee matchup on a Sunday night that everyone can see. We talked about Thursday having that marquee game. I think Chris already mentioned when we talked about Thursday nights, LSU gets that nice night to be able to be all to themselves. I know how Chris feels on neutral site games. I'm very curious. I know LSU travels well. I'm not sure how USC is going to travel, even though it's so much closer. So that'll be an also interesting thing to see. But I do love the stadium there in Las Vegas, having been there once.
I'm excited to get there at some point in time. I refuse to go to Vegas basically between May and September. Like October 1st is like the Mason-Dixon line of before I go to any place that's really, really hot. Because I'm a huge baby. I'm excited for this game. I think there's going to be a lot of points. I've said that. We all kind of agree on that. I mean, we haven't seen two teams face off in a marquee situation like this that are more mirrored than this ever. The back-to-back Heisman Trophy winners. You got two coaches coming into their third year at the university, major hires that got pulled away from schools that we never thought they would get pulled away from. So you're replacing that. They're both replacing defensive coordinators because they've both been absolutely putrid at defense. So there's just a lot of question marks. We don't know a whole lot about the quarterbacks. We don't know a lot about the wide receivers other than all of these guys are highly recruited, highly ranked. They've been in systems for a while and they know them. So I think all of those things are going to be fun. The only definitive statement that I can make from the LSU side is this will be the one city that Baton Rouge fans will not be able to drink dry. They will fail at that.
That's fair.
They will fail at that.
Yeah. I will say
there will be some people that won't make it back to Baton Rouge because they won't be alive, because they will try. But they will not succeed.
Yeah. I will say though, if we see USC come out when they're getting ready to run out of the tunnel, if they start acting like dogs and stuff like they did against Alabama, then LSU will win this game by 50 points. But
God, I hope you're right. From your mouth to God's ear. Come on.
But no, I do think that this is going to be a very good game. I love that it's going to be the only game on that night because it is going to be a fantastic game. Going to be a lot of points scored. But as soon as the three of us say that, it's going to be a snooze fest defensive battle that nobody wants to see.
I don't know that we can jinx that. All I can tell you is the last time LSU played Lincoln Riley, it did not go so well for Lincoln Riley. I think Mr. Joseph Burrow scored 8-9 touchdowns, maybe. We dropped a lot of points, and they scored.
It was 7 in the first half, was it not?
Yeah, we were at 48 in the first half, and it was night. So, and that was a playoff game. That's a playoff Oklahoma team that we didn't just put in a locker, that we literally just shoved them all the way into the toilet.
Yeah. But it is
this team's not that team, by the way. This team is not the 2019 LSU Baton Rouge Takers. I know that. I'm not living in that fantasy world. Okay.
Yeah, this is a fantastic slate of games for week 1 of college football. Cannot wait for it to get here. Unfortunately, we do have to wait. I believe I saw today is exactly 100 days until college football. So, I mean, we do get NCAA 25 coming out July 19th. So that's a good way to help us bridge that gap. But it's still, there's nothing like watching college football on television. But Daniel, you want to tell the folks where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on YouTube. Just search Gator Truth Florida Football Podcast. Check me out there. You can check me out on Twitter at Gator Podcast, which has gone on and off from my nameplate tonight. Definitely reach out if you want to say, hey, I think you're crazy, or hey, loved you, whatever. Anything helps, critique, positives, and I've definitely had fun time with you guys tonight. Hopefully I get to come back and do some more and maybe have some more fun working Chris up about revenue sharing later on.
I think you guys can make your own podcast just talking about that right there, and I would tune in for every single second of it. But
yeah,
we do appreciate you having on tonight.
Wow.
Yeah.
That band, just the ladies are just getting turned on as we speak. I can tell you that.
Daniel, we do appreciate you joining us tonight and look forward to having you back on. Chris, you want to tell the folks where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Chris AV Giannini, and I'm there. I'll respond to almost anything. My DMs are always open. People can say nice things, mean things, whatever. I'll talk to you. I'm a pretty decent person, and I just like to be silly and have a good time. Really enjoyed getting to meet Daniel for the first time and getting to see him. And Michael, I appreciate you, and I'm glad to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate having you on as my co-host, and you can find me and my co-host Skylar at the Vol Fanatics Show on YouTube. You can also find us Vol Fanatics 1998 on Twitter. Look for Vol Fanatics Show on all major platforms. As I mentioned, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Facebook, Instagram. We do not have a TikTok. That's something we hadn't got into yet, but you can find us all those places. From myself, from Chris, from Daniel, we appreciate you tuning in tonight, and we will see you guys next week.